Y'all know how much I like polls, right? I love seeing your answers to the silly ones I post on the community page, and generally speaking, polls are just so helpful for determining so many things. Polls can also take on many forms, including, perhaps, even a video format. Is this the most effective form of data collection? No, in fact, it's probably the worst. But the goal here isn't to create data points. No, no, no. It's to have fun. So today, I'll be posing questions to you lovely viewers in the Would You Rather format, all of which have no wrong answers, but they'll all be twisted to fit the world of Twisted Wonderland. And while it would be fun for these to make sense, like opening a bakery with maybe Trey or Azul, why not add in a little chaos? This is a gacha game after all, and every gacha game is beholden to the whims of RNG, no? So our bestie, the Wheel, is back again to decide which characters we'll be picking between for each of our questions. I've got my own rationales for my picks, but I'll be leaving that for the end so y'all can play this little game with your friends, fellows, or just yourself, uninterrupted and uninfluenced. Are y'all ready? Then let's get started with our very first question. Would you rather play a spell drive or Magishift game with Ruggy or Jamil? Question number 2. Would you rather bring Malleus or Silver to karaoke with the Pop Music Club? Question number 3. Would you rather create a potion and alchemy class with the Rook or Vil? Question number 4. Would you rather get tutored in flight class by Azul or Floyd? Question number 5. Would you rather bring Idia or Rook with you on a hike with Jade? Question number 6. Would you rather share your lunch with Cruel or Malleus? Question number 7. Would you rather wash windows as punishment with Ace or Floyd? Question number 8. Would you rather have a study session in the library with Sam or Jade? Question number 9. Would you rather take remedial classes with Vil or Sebek? Question number 10. Would you rather have a Magicam photo shoot with Jack or Leona? Question number 11. Would you rather gather plants in the botanical garden with Deuce or Azul? Question number 12. Would you rather watch an NRC versus RSA basketball game with Crowley or Ethel? Question number 13. Would you rather bring Riddle or Kaleem to tackle a sale at Sam's Mystery Shop? Question number 14. Would you rather solve the Rose Maze with Ruggy or Ace? Question number 15. Would you rather spend a Saturday in town with Riddle or Silver? Question number 16. Would you rather hide behind Edia or cater to sleep in class? Question number 17. Would you rather bake someone birthday party treats with Cater or Lilia? Question number 18. Would you rather attend a feast in Scarabia with Leona or Train? Question number 19. Would you rather cheer on an NRC versus RSA track meet with Jade or Cruel? And finally, question number 20. Would you rather confront Crowley's negligence with Apple or Deuce? Now then, do you have all your answers written down, perhaps in the form of a comment on this video? Perfect. Then let's compare our notes. Oh, and I'll be passively mentioning some EN server story content here and there, so just to be aware of that. Anyways, for our first question, and for most of the questions, honestly, I had a hard time picking since this was a little bit more open-ended and not all of the pairings made sense for every single question, but I didn't think to specify on question number 1 whether or not we were going up against these people or playing with these people. But I think that my intention was to have this be a collaborative effort, like picking a teammate. So in that case, I'm going with Ruggy, since he has the most practical experience, since he's also in the Spell Drive Club and is a member of Savannah Claw, a dorm which does a lot of Spell Drive practice kind of generically. He'd have all of the experience to make up for my shortcomings, and he's not afraid to play dirty. Jamil, on the other hand, is really smart and is also unopposed to using underhanded tactics, so I'm sure he'd have no trouble excelling at the game too. But if for some reason the enemy team included Kaleem on the off chance that this happened in this hypothetical scenario, Jamil might have to intentionally throw the match, and I'm here to win. So it is with Ruggy that I shall side for this particular scenario. For question number 2, I'm picking Malleus hands down. The boy needs to get out more, and he absolutely needs more socialization with folks outside of Diasambia, which this opportunity would afford him. As much as I love Silver, he would likely fall asleep once or twice during the karaoke session, which kind of makes him not as fun in this scenario. I'm sure he'd be a lovely counterbalance to the chaos of the pop music club, but I'm not sure that he would end up enjoying it that much or participating that much if he happened to fall asleep. I envision Malleus being awake, excited, and just overall over the moon to have been invited to anything, and karaoke would be no exception. I think he'd find the overall experience novel, new, and wonderful. Lilia will be there to help guide things if they begin to derail. Kaleem has no malice towards anyone, so I'm sure he'd be down to clown with Malleus. And we can see Cater attempt to kind of befriend Malleus at times, although this also does come off as clout farming a little bit, depending on the scenario. But I still imagine that Cater would be pretty chill and would welcome him into the karaoke just fine. We'll all be singing to our heart's content well into the evening or morning, and it'll be a jolly good time all around. For question number 3, I decided to go with Vil because I feel like that would be the most educational experience. If I were to fail the potion with Rook, I'll be met with some form of incomprehensible praise. And if I were to do well and not fail, I would also be met with some form of incomprehensible praise, although it would come with a side of pride in this scenario. In both cases, I don't feel like I would know exactly what I did wrong, or I would get confused along the way with Rook's explanation. And while Rook is good in alchemy and in science, as he did help Epple with an assignment one time, and he is also in the science club, I don't feel like I would really grasp potion making with Rook. Vil, on the other hand, is a master of alchemy, crafting potent poisons and fabulous cosmetics. This is a subject in which Vil excels, so I would no doubt be enlightened by merely observing him, let alone helping him or having him help me. Vil will not give me incomprehensible praise. In fact, I'd be surprised if he even deemed me worthy of the title of Spuddling, but nonetheless, his strict nature is going to teach me way more in this context than Rook would have. And I'm not 100% sure that my curiosity would be as welcome with Vil, but I don't really care. I'm game for the challenge and I want to learn, so I'm gonna learn it from the best of the best. So, question 4. When the wheel immediately landed on Azul for this question, I could hardly contain my laughter. And then when it followed up with Floyd, I nearly died. But I am still alive, and I feel like there is no good choice here. If I were getting tutored by Azul, the man who cannot fly to save his life, I would not be learning much at all. If I were instead getting tutored by Floyd, the man who might just drag me into the stratosphere if the mood strikes him, I might not get out alive. I'm also very wary of the context in which Floyd and I would be in this predicament because tutoring doesn't really seem like something Floyd would do. Maybe on a whim or if he thought it could be amusing, but there are 1,001 things I feel like he would rather tutor you in than flying, like say swimming. However, that said, he can be a good teacher like we see in the Stitch event where he teaches Ace how to swim and fish. So if I were lucky in this tutoring session, it could turn out good for me too. But there is also a huge risk that it goes terribly, terribly wrong, and while I am not generally a gambling gal, I'm definitely not a gambling gal with these stakes. Azul, on the other hand, would likely be trying to tutor me because of a contract, since the poor boy just cannot get off the ground. And that opens up so many more questions than it does answers. Did I bait Azul into taking this contract to secretly tutor him instead? Or to motivate him to win so much so that he actually gets good at flying? What do I even get out of that arrangement? Why would Azul ever take that deal on to begin with? Why am I going to the worst flyer on campus to get tutoring? What is happening? I think I have to risk it for the biscuit and go with Floyd here, because even if I ended up dead, I will have at least had some fun along the way, I would hope. And at the very least, Floyd knows more flying maneuvers, so he could save me from myself better if he was in the mood to do so in that scenario. Question number 5. I also cackled a little bit when Edea popped up for this one because I feel like this guy would never go on a hike for fun, let alone a hike with Jade. Are you insane? Maybe if it was a VR hike with one of those super fancy harness thingies, but there is no way Edea himself is coming along into the forest for any reason short of being forced. I'm pretty sure the only reason he was at Camp Vargas was because Azul or the other club members forced him to be. I can't quite remember exactly the circumstances that led to Edea coming to that event, but regardless, he's a big nope here. Therefore, I chose Rook, who I think would be well suited generically for this task. Jade and Rook get along surprisingly well, or perhaps it's not that surprising given their natures, so I can totally see the two of them having a wonderful little outing together where I can just kind of chill and let them do their thing and enjoy the nature that is surrounding us. I also think Rook would have no qualms about this offer and would take it up in a heartbeat. He was willing to study Jade from the bushes for weeks, so I don't think he would be opposed at all to hanging out with the two of you consensually to also get some observations in. Plus, he's very good in the woods and would probably enlighten us too about the fauna, while Jade would chat about the flora, which rounds out this encounter quite well, I think. Controversially, for question number 6, I'm not going to pick either. No one is touching my food. Don't you dare. But if I had to pick someone to share a morsel with, I'm gonna go with Malleus. I feel like Corel is a bit stricter with his diet, so he might be less willing to try somebody else's food, although I think he'd be extremely graceful in either his refusal or acceptance. With Malleus, though, I think he'd be very welcoming and perhaps even impressed by your boldness to have offered him this dish. A human not only unafraid to approach him, but one that is also offering him food. Marvelous. Nothing I share with him can be as bad as what Lilia makes, so I doubt I'll be giving Malleus food poisoning either, and maybe he'd really like it. Maybe he'd really hate it. But I think that he would 100% try whatever you handed him if you framed it as a gift, and I think he'd also be likely to return the favor given his nature. Not that I'm doing this with the intention of getting kickbacks for it. No, not at all. It's purely generosity. Who could stand by and watch a dragon starve, even if it be for a mere moment, right? So Malleus is getting half of my sandwich. There you go, bud. Oh, no, the wheel must be a Twist fan because at this point it's made several canonical connections, and I doubt that that's pure coincidence. The only rule that I had set out when making this video was that folks couldn't be picked more than twice, and yet somehow, Ace, of all people, popped up for the washing of windows as punishment. The universe is truly benevolent. We've also got Floyd again, who I think would also try to weasel his way out of this punishment in much the same way as Ace did, but I cannot fight Floyd. There is no way I can contend with the eel if he's not in the mood, so Ace, Acey boy, get over here and help me wash these windows. You had to do it once before, you now have to do it again, and there's nothing you can do to escape this fate. The head mage, the wheel, and I hath spoken. Chop, chop. Question number 8. Sam or Jade for a library study session? My, what a toughie. It was certainly a choice on the wheel's part to pick one of the staff members for this question, and specifically to pick one that doesn't actually teach anything to be a study partner. But I feel like Sam would have wonderful lessons to teach us that maybe would be a bit more practical in nature. Why we'd be in the library together studying these practical things, I'm not entirely sure, since I feel like a more practical lesson, but I'm not going to complain too much. I feel like Sam would be a very fun person to talk to, and I think he'd probably be good at advising in this way. Plus, I doubt he'd have any shady intentions in this scenario, unlike a certain other someone who absolutely is only here to get something grander. Jade would be a fantastic study buddy as well, but he would also certainly be in this position to get some sort of advantage. Perhaps it's just to get more info on you, or perhaps it's as innocent as a general exchange of knowledge, but it could also be very sinister, and I'm not sure that I trust him. So in this scenario, despite my general disposition to side with the Octavanel Fellows, I'm going to have a study session in the library with Sam. On to question number 9. This one is Vil. It's Vil. It couldn't be anyone other than Vil. If Vil is taking the time out of his day to help me in a remedial class, you bet your bottom dollar that I am paying such close attention to everything that is happening, unless it is math, because I cannot with numbers. But I'd still do my bestest to understand with Vil there, even in math. Vil is going to be stern, but I can deal with that. I can't deal with Sebek's sternness, though. Or at least I don't think I would do as well with him. I just don't feel like the two of us would vibe together very well. Even if Sebek is trying to help me, I don't know. I think Sebek would be rather earnest in this regard. However, depending on how stubborn the two of us would be, I can see it going south rather quickly. So, if I'm already going to be taking remedials, and I don't want anything to get any worse, my final choice is going to be Vil. Now, for question 10, the wheel posed a very interesting conundrum. Jack or Leona for pictures or Magicam, a platform I feel like neither of them uses if they have it at all. I don't know under what context I could possibly convince Leona to pose for me or be cooperative in any way during a photo shoot, let alone one for Magicam. Perhaps if this were during the Terror is Trending Halloween event, I could maybe squeak in a photo shoot into the Savannah Club Pirate setup, but I doubt that Leona would be a willing participant in that either. Jack, on the other hand, is a bit more persuadable, and while he acts like he doesn't care, he does. So I can envision him posing or helping me out to get those perfect photos. Maybe we can even do a cactus photo shoot with the lovely little cacti, and that might get him on board. Perhaps during that I could take a few candids of Jack with his precious plants for him to then review before I post them anywhere, and it could be a nice, wholesome time all around. So with that thought, I'm gonna go with Jack here. Question 11. Man, I am torn here because I think both of these guys would be so fun to pick ingredients with. Deuce is just a wholesome guy, so regardless of the context, I can imagine him having a good time gathering the plants with someone else and just kind of bantering back and forth, or at least he would be serious enough that it would turn out, I think, quite well for the two of us. Azul likely roped us into helping him gather materials to complete a contract request if this is happening outside of class, And if it is happening inside of class, he might be a bit too focused on schmoozing to pay too much attention to you unless you were the one that he was schmoozing, but then there's this business undertone to the activity that I can't fully shake given Azul's nature. I personally would rather not have the extra layer on this particular interaction, so I'm going to go with Deuce here. I feel like Deuce is going to take things very seriously and make sure that you're doing well the whole time, regardless of the context, and I like that a bit more. Plus, I think he'd just be a fun guy to hang out with. So Deuce is my pick here. With a basketball game, I really want to go with Crowley, just to watch him slowly get more and more agitated as RSA continues to score points and win. I think it'd be so fun to watch him try to keep his composure since he'd be in the company of others, all the while knowing how torn up he's getting because of his pride. Doesn't that sound like a delightful time? I think so, and it would make purchasing him snacks worth it because you know he's not going to shell out for his own snacks. Apple would also be a super fun person to go see a game with, as I can see his competitive nature coming out in full force to cheer on his friends and the school in general. I'm sure you'd hear many a colorful word coming from him, too, throughout the game as RSA wins more and more points. And I think Apple would be kind enough to buy his own snacks, maybe even ours, like the gentleman he is. He also seems like the type to have snuck in a few apples past the guards, which is fantastic. I love that. However, for this one, I will be indulging my darker side and taking Crowley to the game with me just for the pleasure of experiencing his discomfort. Unlucky question number 13 is a rather unfortunate choice because I have no faith in either Riddle or Kaleem to tackle the chaos of a Sam sale. Riddle would likely get frustrated over the disorder of the sale and may or may not pass judgment upon those unsuspecting shoppers, which is not something I'm equipped to deal with. Or Riddle would get crushed in the fray, which is also a fate I don't want. Kaleem, on the other hand, will absolutely get distracted by all that's going on and might even start paying for everyone's everything to stop the fighting, which I think would only end up creating more fights because now everything everyone was fighting over is essentially free. Or he'd stock up on a bunch of stuff he doesn't need, like he did during one of the New Year's sales, which is not great either. I feel like I should be apologizing for my lack of confidence in both of these individuals, but I think the more manageable sale partner might be Riddle, because I can see his rage being a very effective crowd parting tool, potentially. If nothing else, I feel like he'd start to enforce the rules of the sale, like quantity limits or, things of that nature. And he wouldn't be so easily distracted. So if I could use Riddle as a distraction with his anger to then get the stuff that I needed, this could work out quite nicely. So Riddle it is. Ooh, so heading into and solving a rose maze with either of these two I think could be fun. But one of these lovely fellows has the home field advantage. Now the bigger question is whether or not Ace has traversed the mazes before and actually knows where he's going. I would have to imagine that Ace had, because I feel like he's definitely run into the mazes before to avoid punishment from Riddle, so he might know a thing or two about entrances and exits. Ruggy would have no idea where to go, I think, but I do imagine that he'd be able to navigate fairly well regardless. If all else fails, he's got magic, right? So he could just make a path out of the maze if we were really lost. He may not want to, given it would invoke Riddle's ire, but desperate times do call for desperate measures, and Ruggy's a guy that'll do whatever needs to get done, right? Even still, I think I'm gonna go with Ace here because as much as I love mazes, I also like being able to get out of them, and I think Ace is my best shot at that without causing any upsets with a certain someone. So I'll go with Ace. Now, spending a Saturday in town, my, with either Riddle or Silver. Ooh, who do I think would be more fun to hang out with? My gut is to say Silver, but I do think hanging out with Riddle would also be fun. Perhaps not quite as fun as with Silver though, but that's only because I can see Silver being more easily convinced to partake in non-academic activities. I just get the vibe that I'd be able to get Silver to go to the farmer's market or Little Town Expo much more easily than Riddle. I do think Riddle needs to partake in more non-academic activities, but if I can't convince him on the merit of the experience, I'll be out a fun Saturday. If I had just one day in Twisted Wonderland and had to pick between the two of them to hang out with, I'd go with Silver, so that's where my answer to this question lands. Oh, 416 now. As much as I love the idea of hiding behind a floating tablet, I don't think that's very practical, so this one is going to Cater. If Idia happened to actually show up to class, then he'd be a much better individual to hide behind, since I think he's a little bit taller, if I'm not mistaken, and his hair is quite distracting, so I think it could draw attention away from my hunched over form behind him. However, 99% of the time he's just a tablet, which is much less distracting and takes up much less space. Cater, on the other hand, is a real one and would absolutely do his best to hide you from the teacher, assuming that you have a good enough relationship with him. He's also decently tall, however he is also kinda sunny, so he might draw too much attention to himself and therefore to me hiding behind him, but operating on the assumption that we were besties or bestie adjacent, and that sleeping isn't a habit of mine, then I think hiding behind Cater would be safe, so he still gets my vote. Oh, question number 17. Baking with Cater or baking with Lilia? Cater or Lilia? I wonder who would actually create something edible. Such a tough choice, but I think I'm going to have to go with Cater on this one. Lilia is a very enthusiastic cook, however he is also a very experimental cook, and I feel like a birthday party just isn't the right venue to show off his newest creations to, you know? Cater, on the other hand, has maybe at some point watched Trey bake something, so he might have a bit of a practical knowledge of how to create things that are more conventional in nature. So I feel like he's the better buddy for this specific endeavor. Although, if by some odd chance someone from Heartstable happened to slight me, I might consider clowning around in the kitchen with Lilia. It may be a bit unfair to give food poisoning to everyone on account of one or two individuals, but that's a sacrifice I might be willing to make depending on the circumstances. As it stands, though, Heartstable will be spared and Cater will be helping me with the treats. Ooh, so for 18, now, a feast is a fantastic time, and one in Scarabia has got to be the best of the best, especially with Kaleem and by extension Jamil at the helm. But which of these two should I take along for the journey? Leona might be used to these sorts of gatherings given his status, and I'm sure he'd be fine getting a free meal as long as meat was involved. He'd likely also slink away at some point if it became too much or he just wanted to go, and might nap somewhere else or go back to his dorm. Train, on the other hand, would be very prim and proper, and he would expect me to be as well, I'd assume. I don't know how well he'd handle the flavor profile of the foods in general, since his favorite food, vichyssoise, is rather light in seasoning, I think. But I'm sure he'd be gracious and at least try what he was offered. However, I do think I'd be a bit stifled by Train, whereas Leona likely wouldn't care too much about me, so I would be free to do whatever I wanted and hang out with anybody and eat whatever without any overhanging expectations. And if Leona did decide to join me, that would just be a boon. So I'm going to bring Leona along for this particular party. Now then, going to a track meet with either Jade or Cruel. What an interesting duo for this question. I think off the top of my head, I'd have to pick Cruel. I feel like Cruel might be present for these events as a member of the school or for camaraderie and that sort of thing. So perhaps this is an instance where he was interested in critiquing the RSA uniforms and we could chat about fashion instead of sports during the sports game. Jade, I think, might be a bit similar in this regard, honestly, as I can see him being interested in the people more than their performance and watching the crowds to any potentially interesting individuals. I know that shoes are specifically Floyd's thing, but Jade also did egg on Idia to create Ortho sports gear because of Idia's comments about shoes and running and feet and legs in general. So I think as a merman, the track shoes, as well as the overall focus of track and field sports, might be fascinating to him. However, this does mean that the conversation at the sports game would likely end up revolving around sports. Shocking, I know, which would bore me quite quickly. While fashion may not be the only thing we talk about if I was with Carell, I'd be more interested in that and the impact of the fashion on the performance, like we see discussed by Carell in Jack's PE uniform vignette. So I think going down that route and having that certainty speaks to me more for this question. Oh, last but not least, question 20. My, the wheel really is our bestie, isn't it? I am so glad it gave us two very spicy boys for this confrontation. Apple's got a lot of moxie, and I think he'd be a greatly supportive person to bring along to such a confrontation. He's also someone who can fight well and who doesn't fear speaking his mind, so I think I'd be in good hands during this event with Apple on my side. Deuce has a whole heck of a lot of experience as a delinquent, which presumably also includes combat experience to some degree. So I think he'd be quite safe in the physical altercation that may or may not break out about confronting Crowley with his negligence. The problem with Deuce is that he is also currently trying to be an honor student, and an honor student wouldn't beat up the head mage, now would they? Well, I'm not recommending that we throw fists, and I doubt that this would end in physical or magical violence. If it happened to come up, I don't think that Deuce would be able to back me up in the way that I'd need him to in that specific part of the scenario. However, I do think that Apple might. So this one is going to Apple. Ideally, in this scenario, I'd be bringing Malleus, since he can contest Crowley in both magical and physical altercations. But the wheel did not bless us with him, so between Deuce and Apple, I have to choose Apple. There's just more certainty with Apple. He's willing to get down and dirty if it happens, where I think Deuce would be very hesitant. That is all of my reasons for all of these lovely questions. I'm quite curious if we're anything alike or if all of my answers were totally different from yours. So let me know your thoughts down below. And if you liked this video, please also let me know with a like or a comment or maybe even a subscribe. And now, before you go, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.